A young perspective on hot-button issues around the world. This is The Hub.
In the Western literature, by and large, people focus largely on Dunkirk, on Normandy landing, and on the Pearl Harbor, the war in the Pacific, as well as the war in Europe. Little attention was paid to the sacrifices made by the Chinese people against the Japanese aggression. People tend to ignore or even dismiss the war in the Tian'anmen battlefield, where over 35 million Chinese lives were lost, $600 billion of loss and damages. Great sacrifices made by the Chinese people in a 14-year-long arduous struggle against Japanese aggression. So here are some very compelling data, I would say, from 1931 through 1941. As many as 80 to 94% of Japan's forces were tied down by the Chinese forces here. Even in August 1945, over half of Japan's forces were engaged by the Chinese here in China. The Chinese troops killed or wounded some 1.5 million Japanese troops, which accounted for over 70% of Japanese forces' total casualties. What does that mean? That means the prevention of the Japanese forces from launching a westward expansion all the way towards the Soviet Union. And also that meant prevention of the Japanese forces from launching a southward expansion against Southeast Asian countries or even the Pacific Island countries. Of course, we've heard from the Chinese President Xi delivering a very important message. The message is about peace. It is a message about China no longer can be bullied. It is a message about China standing up to the rest of the world and allying with whomever wanted to build peace together in solidarity. And it is also a message of seeking new ways to establish a fairer world order. If you think about the 4 global initiatives with the global governance initiatives in place as the latest addition, it calls for a total overhaul of the existing world order that is based largely on bloc confrontations, coalition forming, us versus them, we versus they, kind of a new Cold War mentalities. And President Xi is arguing that development-first multilateralism should take place. If you look at China's Belt and Road mega infrastructure projects around the world, delivering tens of thousands of projects and initiatives, benefiting people with roads, ports, bridges, airports, stadiums built or renovated, increasing connectivity, increasing efficiency, increasing welfare for all the residents. So the message from the September 3rd parade here at the Tian'anmen Square is clear. China has a modern and modernizing military, and it is modernizing its military fast. China can no longer be bullied. It has the full capabilities to defend itself should there be an adversary. And another key message is that China is a force for peace, a force for development, and a force for global solidarity. It is willing to lead those who are willing to build this community of shared future for mankind, where there's common development, there's common empathy, and there's a common love for peace. China's 14-year war of resistance against Japanese aggression stands as one of the longest and bloodiest chapters of World War II. Yet many of its heroes left behind no photographs, no written records, only their sacrifice. A new documentary, Mountains and Rivers Bearing Witness, turns to digital technology to recover lost images and voices, breathing life back into these silent witnesses of history. But how can the filmmakers recreate a past with so few traces remaining? Our reporter Hu Jie has the story.
When you try to picture the heroes in China's war of resistance against Japanese aggression, what do you see? A weathered veteran? A boy not yet grown up? Or a brave woman rushing into battle?
Well, the fact is, through 14 years of resistance, countless heroes left no photographs or written words, many not even their names in the record of history. Dawn broke over the quiet plains of eastern China's Jiangsu province. 82 soldiers of New Force Army stood against the force many times their size, over 1,000 Japanese invaders. Outnumbered yet unbroken, they fought. From the first light of the morning to the falling dusk, each man holding the line so that their comrades and the villagers behind them might live. Today,
only one face is remembered.
Commander Li Yunpeng.
The remaining 81 young faces left unknown forever in the battle. Until the documentary film Mountains and the Rivers Bearing Witness decided to locate and zoom on them.
These heroes came back to life through digital technology.
We noted that unfortunately there was barely any images or records left to the 82 martyrs of the Liulaozhang village. How does this film portray this chapter of history and the people involved?
Although there were no photos, we did have written records. So when we created the animated restoration, we invited an illustrator to bring them to life. We based the recreation on written descriptions. For example, the deputy platoon leader, nicknamed Old Mongol, was tall and strong, so we designed him with a bald head. Another soldier was a secretariat and once a propagandist, so we gave him glasses. Among the 82, however, one did leave a photograph behind, Li Yunpeng. We felt it was essential to include this real image. In a letter to his father, he even wrote of how he had grown on the battlefield. This blending of fact and artistic recreation allows us to tell a story rooted in truth, showing audiences how the 82 martyrs of Liulaozhang fought to the very end on the battlefield.
When the stories of the faceless are brought to light, the fragments of history must be reclaimed. In the film, scenes from the CPC's 7th Congress are restored from original negatives, with digital technology breathing life into details long buried in time.
What we most wanted was to bring this distant historical materials vividly to life for the audience. So we carried out a 4K restoration and added layers of sound design to recreate the atmosphere of the original scene. In addition, journalists from many other countries also filmed extensively at the time. Some of those copies are kept at the China Film Archive, and we used them as sources. We also tracked down footage shot by Soviet cameraman Roman Karman at the film archive.
These images reveal an extraordinary encounter. In 1937, U.S. Marine Major Evans Carson, sent by President Roosevelt, arrived in China to study guerrilla warfare. Passing through Xi'an, he crossed the paths with Soviet volunteers on their way to aid China. In the eastern battlefield of World War II, Americans and the Soviets met by chance, a rare moment of wartime convergence. Later, they would fight on the European and the Pacific fronts, respectively. China's resistance against Japan became known as part of the world's united fight against fascism.
The footage speaks for itself. From 1931 to 1945, China was not a side stage of World War II, but the main eastern fronts, a key factor in the shaping of the war's outcome.
As restoration leaves away 80 years of dust, and sound brings the silent footage to life, shells thunder, people shout. Only by reviving these faces and voices can we truly retrace the path of the Chinese nation.
China made an enormous contribution in the 14 years of war. We were the first to fight and the longest to endure in the global anti-fascist struggle. China held down more than 2/3 of Japan's main ground forces and much of its air force, which gave crucial support to the Allies. That contribution was immense.
They were never nameless. Each was a son, a daughter, a brother, a sister, a comrade. Their presence lingers still.
One scene stays with me. A young female soldier with the sweetest smile. I couldn't help but think, today someone her age might still be in school, yet in the midst of war, she had already carried a rifle into battle. War is crucial, and we may never know what became of her. Yet it was precisely through the unity and sacrifice of countless people like her that our nation won independence, and that we enjoy peace and happiness today.
The faces of these nameless people deserve to be remembered. In remembering them, we honor how the nation held into the light in the darkest times. And in doing so, we also honor humanity's shared fight against darkness and for hope.
During those years of struggle, countless literary and artistic works emerged, bringing strength and hope in the nation's darkest hours. Among them is a song every Chinese person knows, a lament for the lost homes and a cry of defiance. Named after the Songhua River, it carries the memory of suffering under Japanese occupation and the spirit of the people's unyielding resistance. Our reporter Wang Naiqian has the story.
Every Chinese knows the song about this river, and standing here, you will understand why. In the early 20th century, Northeast China was among the country's most prosperous regions. Nourished by the Songhua River, it was rich in resources, making it a world-renowned soybean producer and a major source of steel, coal, and other minerals. Then came September 18, 1931, known in the West as the Mukden Incident. Japanese forces destroyed sections of their own railway near Shenyang, blamed the Chinese, and used this fabricated attack as justification to invade. This marked the beginning of Japan's invasion of Northeast China, the start of 14 years of bloodshed and turmoil. This is the Miners' Tomb Memorial in Liaoyuan, Jilin Province. Tens of thousands of miners died here. After the invasion, Japan seized the coal mines to fuel for their war machine. They worked people to death, literally.
At that time, each miner had a mandatory quota. Each worker had to work 13 or 14 hours underground every day because they had to produce 5 cars of coal daily, nearly 1.7 tons. When they went to work, they were given just 2 steamed corn buns. That was their food quota for the entire day. Any sign of dissatisfaction caused by the Japanese invaders and their collaborators will lead to all kinds of brutal torture in the torture chamber. To name some of them, they were mauled by savage dogs or forced to kneel on spinning bricks. Such atrocities were perpetrated on defenseless miners.
In 1932, the city produced 162,000 tons of coal, and by 1944, the number soared to 2.1 million tons. Over 40 years, Japan has seized around 15.5 million tons of coal, fueling its own development at a devastating cost. Their remains tell the story of unimaginable suffering. Some skulls bear knife marks, some leg bones were severed, and some still had their legs bound with copper wire. But no one can say how many truly died here, because many didn't even leave behind bodies.
There was a major mine disaster then, the Tian'anmen mine disaster that killed over 400 people. When my father heard the news, he rushed to the site immediately because my uncle was trapped inside. But they were prohibited to approach the mine. The Japanese sealed the entrance. My uncle was only a teenager. We couldn't even find his body. He was sealed inside. After liberation, when people finally opened the mine, they found more than 20 people right at the entrance, with their hands still in between the bricks, struggling for a way out.
His uncle never left that mine. Under Japanese occupation, Northeast China had become a land of suffering and death. Hundreds of thousands were forced to flee their homes. They would never return. Far away in Xi'an, a teacher named Zhang Hanhui watched the heartbreaking exodus of displaced northeastern soldiers and civilians. Stricken with grief and burning with anger, he composed a song named after the river of their homeland. Its haunting melody carried a raw, unshakable emotion, one that drew tears not of despair, but of defiance. Sweeping across China, the song turned mourning into resolve, grief into an unyielding will to resist the invaders.
夺回我身无邪的宝藏。这歌吧，在部队也唱。I sang the song when I was in the troops. 在抗联时候也唱。I also sang it when I became a member of the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army.
Wang Jitang is 95 years old now, but when he talks about his days as an underground agent, every memory remains vivid in his mind. At just 13, he joined the Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army, a communist-led resistance force. From then on, he embarked on countless dangerous missions. Once, to gather intelligence, he jumped onto a Japanese military transport train.
I jumped onto a train and pretended to be the train inspector. I had 7 years of schooling and knew some Japanese, so I went up to the Japanese soldier and asked him if they were heading to the Soviet Union. That's what the Soviet Union needed to know, whether Japan was about to advance northward into the Soviet territory. The Japanese soldier thought I was checking the train and told me they were going to Changchun. So I confirmed they weren't heading to the Soviet Union. My mission was completed and I was going to withdraw. But suddenly I heard someone scolding me and asking what I was there for. I realized I was spotted by the Japanese military police. I tried to jump off the train to escape. I yanked the door handle, but he lunged at me with his bayonet on his Type 38 rifle. I ducked down, but since I was short, I got stabbed in the forehead above my left eye. Blood poured down. My lip was split open, and I was literally swallowing my blood. He also stabbed me in the shoulder.
Wang Jitang survived that brutal attack, but his scars tell the story of a much larger struggle. The Northeast Anti-Japanese United Army that Wang served fought longer than any other force in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, 14 relentless years without surrender. Cut off from the outside world, they waged a lonely battle in a brutal wilderness. With barely 30,000 fighters, they faced 700,000 enemy troops, but never gave up, killing or wounding over 180,000 of them.
I'm not afraid of getting killed. I just worried about failing to complete my mission. With Japan's defeat, I feel relieved because my efforts paid off. Seeing the Chinese people enjoy peace today makes me happy.
After learning about all that suffering, standing here, I finally understand why this song can move an entire nation to fight back. Because this isn't just a song about the Songhua River, it's a song about home. And when everything you cherished is at stake, there's only one choice: to give up everything to protect it. The suffering has never been forgotten, but it has been transformed into the strength that rebuild this land, and into the love that flows like the river itself through every generation.
80 years ago, the world emerged from the devastation of World War II with a shared resolve to build peace. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascism War, and the founding of the United Nations. As one of the key forces in shaping the post-war international order, China, along with other peace-loving nations of the world, has remained steadfast defenders of fairness and justice under the UN framework, working to ensure its values reach more of the world. Now looking back, we see China advancing hand-in-hand with the international community towards justice, peace, development, and a shared future. At this critical juncture, we invite you to join us in reflecting on that remarkable journey. In the aftermath of World War II, waves of anti-colonial movements swept across Asia and Africa as former colonies and semi-colonies began their struggle for national independence. Founded in 1949, the People's Republic of China became a strong advocate for these newly independent nations. At the 1955 Bandung Conference, China joined other participating countries in issuing the Bandung Declaration, an appeal for anti-imperialism, sovereignty, and peace.
Number one, that they had to stand together if they were able to build a world of peace and development. And secondly, they understood that to build this world of peace and development, they needed to collaborate because most of these countries simply didn't have the resources to develop themselves. Their resources had been stolen from them. They didn't have the wealth. They didn't have the technology. When the British were finally thrown out of India, the literacy rate was only 12%. So they needed each other to share skills, to share expertise, to have understanding as they move forward to build a new world. So this unity at Bandung was really crucial.
In 1971, with the support from many developing nations, the People's Republic of China regained its rightful seat at the United Nations as the sole legitimate representative of China. This historic moment was not only a victory for China, but also a milestone for emerging nations around the world, signaling a shift in the global balance of power.
What this country has gone through goes beyond description. What it has done for its people cannot be imagined in human history. And that day was the beginning of the world getting to know the China that we know.
China's reform and opening up, launched in 1978, ushered in a new era of development and integration with the global economy. By rejoining international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund in 1980, and later joining the World Trade Organization in 2001, China became a key driver to global economic growth and a strong advocate for multilateralism and free trade.
China is probably one of the poster children for the success of the multilateral trading system. Since it joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, China has done phenomenally well. Its per capita income has increased over 12 times. It's now the largest exporter in the world. It's the second largest importer. So on all counts, China has done extremely well. And
China is a very active member of the international community, very active member of our organization, of the International Monetary Fund. At the IMF, China has been a very engaged a member of discussing the right policy choices, monetary policy, fiscal policy, financial sector policy.
China's post-war journey, marked by its opposition to hegemony and commitment to development, reflects a deep dedication to a fair and cooperative international order. Guided by the principles of the UN Charter, China continues to uphold the rights of developing countries and promotes global cooperation, embodying its role as a responsible major power.
I think it is crucial to propose initiatives for global governance. Today, we have somehow reached a dead end regarding global governance, as it is facing obstacles and often lopsided.
In response to the question of what kind of world to build and how to build it, China has put forward the vision of a community with a shared future for humanity. To tackle global development challenges, address security dilemmas, and promote mutual learning among civilizations, China has introduced the 3 global initiatives on development, security, and civilization, offering strong support for building this shared future. Amid a new wave of global development, through platforms and mechanisms based on equality and mutual benefit, the global community is achieving new progress in this endeavor. Together with neighboring countries and fellow developing countries, China is embarking on a new journey of modernization, offering fresh guidance and direction for global development.
Well, China has been playing a fundamental role in the international discussions. We have, in this conversation, already mentioned several elements from climate to development. I think that the commitment of China on multilateralism is key. The world needs more global coordination and reinforcement of multilateralism. So I think that this approach is fundamental, and obviously China plays a vital role.
80 years after World War II, the very values once defended through great sacrifices are now facing renewed challenges. History teaches us that lasting peace and progress can only be achieved through dialogue and multilateral cooperations. China says it will continue to stand on the right side of history and advocating for peace, development, and shared prosperity for all.